Welcome to Theory of Paranormal. My name is Pax with my co-host Dalton. This is seasons 3, episode 1, and is going to be on the crazy and amazing subject of crimes and possession. And what I mean by that is it is people claiming possession as a reason for their heinous acts that they have committed in their lifetime as a defense. Everybody that listens to Theory Paranormal, we would like to thank you formally for following along to season 3. If you've been with season 1 and 2, if you are just now joining us, welcome. We are on multiple platforms all over the internet, globally. So any favorite platform that you listen to, whether it's Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music, Audible, YouTube, or even Apple Podcast or Pandora Radio, we are there. Also, Podbean is the premier listening service that we utilize. So with that being said, how you doing today, Dalton?
Oh, trucking along, man. How you doing? How's life been treating you?
Hey, woke up today, still got a pulse, still able to do my good thing that I do every day, so it's a good day.
I hear that, my friend. I hear that. So we're going to talk about basically crimes that were committed by people that were hearing things, voices, and some of them even claim to be have taken over somewhat to have committed these crimes. Who was that sent that in for us?
That would be somebody that was from Florida. Her name was Lena.
Lena. Well, thank you, Lena,
Yep.
for this. We'll do the best we can on this one. It's kind of tough because when you do the research on stuff like this, it's not like this kind of stuff just pops up freely that they had an account where, say a guy was, it might be in the courtroom. You might hear it say, "Oh, I was taken over by a spirit and it told me to do this and that." Well, they're not going to put it on national news. Now I have found some cases that were actually on national news, and we get into those a little bit later. But when you think about, because Lena, I believe, was talking about a video she sent, and it dealt with a man and a woman. And she didn't feel like the man was acting right the whole time he was there. And I guess they went inside the house, and the woman was boiling water. And she had basically, long story short, she kind of, he said, "What's that?" And she said, "Hot water." And he said, and she started to pick it up. And he was like, "You better not throw that at me." And he was acting really weird about it. And basically told her, "I'll shoot you in the effing face if you if you throw that water." And she yelled out, "I invoke you," or something, "in the name of the Lord." I guess she went to throw it, and the dude shot her in the face. Now, his reaction afterwards was very calm, and you know, certain people were asking him questions. He's like, "Yeah, she's laying in there on the floor," blah blah blah. But he had a smile on his face. But before the whole thing is, when you watch it, before she started to move the water and yell out, "In the name of the Lord, in the name of God," he was kind of weird acting, and he was acting, talking strange. But to sit there after he says, "What's that?" and she says, "Hot water," and he just says, for no reason, like, I don't even think she went for it at that moment. But he's like, "If you throw that on me, I'm going to shoot you in the effing face." And he sounded happy about that. You know what I'm saying? It was just all kind of weird. So this brought up the, I guess, for her to come at us and ask us if there's any other things that we may know about where people have been heard voices and stuff and have done horrific things. Does anything come to mind to you?
Well, not also just voices, but individuals that aren't in the right state of mind that have lapse in judgment saying, "Oh, I don't remember I did what I did," or "I blacked out and I remember nothing." or, like you said, the voices, or there was somebody else with me inside telling me to do these things or controlling me. All of these type of things that are just crazy. There's a loose terminology called the Satan defense. And basically, it's an individual that's being found guilty of being guilty of the crime they did or being insane. But it's hard to quantify their actions because it usually involves something going on with some sort of possession or something happening and them pleading and claiming, oh, it was for XYZ reasons. And, when you get certain clergy involved and people of the religion, they'll quantify this and say, yeah, these things are true or real by our account, our experiences, and so forth. And what it comes down to is a lot of people will say, this person made me do it, or the devil made me do it, or they'll say things that they don't have any normal knowledge of. Maybe a name, maybe a phrase, maybe saying things in a language that they've never innately known their whole life. And what's interesting is that there is no real provision in the U.S. law that covers demonic possession as a defense for any crime. And if anything, the facts that are used as a prosecutor side of the house will utilize all the facts that the defense is using to claim or prove insanity. So then that's where the different charges come in, depending on what's going on, where, manslaughter or different homicidal things or things like that. But it's interesting that when it comes to legalities, that there is no official doctrine to say, oh, well, this person claimed this and they said it was this or that. So we're going to say for whatever religious reasons or whatever it may be, it's very black and white and the court stays out of that. And all it always comes down to is either the individual is either in perfect sound mind, meaning they're cognitively there, they can make clear level decisions and understand things and comprehend things and act on their own accord, or they can't. And if they can't, then it comes down to, is there a psychological problem, a mental deficiency, all the things that contribute to somebody's psyche, quote unquote, mindset. And then that's where it comes into pleading insanity. I thought long about this particular subject in general. And since we got this information as far as this question, and it makes me really wonder how many cases are really out there. And by I say cases, I mean cases that investigators have to deal with, that deal with law enforcement or private investigators or religious individuals have brought to their attention of things that don't make sense. It's not something you can just read in a book and get an answer. You can't make sense of it. You can't quantify it. You can't justify it. And you see, if you look throughout modern day history, there is tons of crimes that are committed by individuals that were one particular way, well-mannered, soft-spoken, no criminal past, no history of anything derogatory, and then one day they just go off the deep end and something happens. And then they have knowledge of something, they speak a foreign language potentially, they're saying phrases, they can recite things in Latin, all of these things that is the farthest from who that individual is. And it makes me think to myself, okay, if this is really happening, if I was to do the glasses half empty, half full, then what's really going on? You know, it it makes me ponder, is life really a big game of chess between good and evil? Metaphorically, hypothetically, religiously, logically, is it really a big game of chess of good and evil? And all throughout history, with religion and movies and TV and scripture and books and anything, there's always a conversation about a balance, about a fight, about good and evil, about keeping things in check, as the phrase goes, of keeping everything at bay. And then that's where I thought to myself, maybe there's some truth to it. Maybe by actions that we do every day, it helps maintain that status quo of keeping things at a neutral state, or hopefully a positive state. So what are your thoughts about all that, Dalton?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll wake up now. No, I'm just kidding. Now I know. Now I know what you feel like when I go off on a tantrum. No, I'm just kidding. So I can understand the court not getting involved. I mean, that is a touchy thing to deal with if you're a judge and you're trying to decide if this guy or this lady was actually hearing voices or any kind of paranormal sort. Now, the thing about stuff, so the scientists, I'm going to go scientific for a minute. They've done some research on, let's just say, people hearing stuff. And according to research, even published in 2021, high levels of absorption in tasks, unusually auditory experiences in childhood, and a high susceptibility to auditory hallucinations occur. You know what I'm
Occur.
saying? More strong. Yes, thank you. More strongly in self-described mediums than general population. So what gets me on that first part is auditory experiences in childhood. Now we've talked about children. When you're a child, you're more accepted to the paranormal. So you're going to hear things. Like I said, if your kid is talking to a imaginary friend, let's just say most likely they're talking to they're talking to a real person. It's not imaginary. They're more open minded. And when you get older, of course you close that down. So the scientists, what they're finding to them could help them better understand the upsetting auditory hallucinations that accompany mental illnesses such as schizophrenia. So we've mentioned, like, even in the possession topic, we mentioned schizophrenia and other medical stuff that you got to kind of look at first before you find out if this person is actually really being taken over or hearing things or possessed. But they say the spiritual's experience of clairvoyance, which, look at that, we've talked about clairvoyance, I believe, and clairaudience, the experience of seeing or hearing something in the absence of external stimulus, is attributed to the spirits and attributed to the spirits of the dead, is a great scientific interest. Both anthropologists study religious and spiritual experience, and scientists studying pathological hallucinatory experiences. Now, it's funny that they can go ahead and name both of those, one that studies religious and spiritual experiences. Now, we talked about that, and most religious people don't believe in that stuff, right? But it's funny they got a study for religious and spiritual experience. And the scientists, of course, go through hallucinations. But researchers they like to better understand why people have auditory experiences. So spiritualists tend to report unusual auditory experience with a positive state in early life, which they are often able to control. Now, the first thing that hits your mind, let's just get rid of the well-known famous ones first. Let's go with Amityville. So Amityville, this guy, what he murdered 6 of his family members. Was it? Was it 6? Do you remember?
Not offhand. No.
I think it was 6. So he was claiming to hear voices in his head, but the his childhood, he had an abusive father, and a passive mother. So you kind of they're kind of falling back into the state of mind that the person's in before they get to the point of hearing voices, right?
Correct.
So he basically had a troubled childhood that led to substance abuse as an adult. So he not only lashed out at his father, but even once threatened him with a gun. The parents hoped letting him live at the home with a weekly, basically, I guess, a watch over or whatever. I guess he barely had a job, but they thought even just keeping him around the house would help. So on the day in question, this guy, he left work and he went to the bar and he kept calling his home to no avail. It and complained to patrons about it. So eventually he left and returned at 6:30 a.m. yelling that somebody's got to help him. They think my mother and father are shot. Now, I don't know why they would kind of lead it to where he went back to the bar, but uh, so authorities, yeah, 6 family members dead in their bed, shot with a rifle around 3:15, and positioned on their stomachs. There was no sign of struggle, nor were they drugged or anything. So here's the weird part: is no local reports of gunshots were logged, with only their dog barking. So the only thing the neighbors heard was the dog barking. They didn't even hear the gunshots. Now, if you killed 6 people in a house, that house is pretty old. I think it's pretty much made of wood on the top floors, I think. But I think it was a 38 caliber rifle,
Hmm.
and that's pretty loud. So no one reported gunshots, just the dog barking. Now, this guy changed his alibi several times from claiming he was at the bar during the time of the murders to mob hitman to where his family he was forced basically to watch. He eventually confessed that he gunned his own family down and stood trial in 1975. Now, the trial, his attorney tried to enter an insanity plea, and the prosecution was arguing, that he was a drug addict. So now we're going back to the drugs, and he was convicted of 6 counts of second degree murder and sentenced to a long time. Anyway,
Hmm.
so now that one there in question, you'd have to question the abusive father and the passive mother. That already he's built over many years of being a child. What is he doing? He's building anger towards them, right? And then the drugs. They didn't say what kind of drugs he was on. So did the drugs, like his anger? The drugs made it sound like. I mean, basically, he was probably talking to himself. Maybe. I mean, this is our opinions again, people. Not. I'm just looking at how he grew up as a child, and during his adult life, he was a drug addict and he drank alcohol. So that right there just makes you kind of wonder if all that had something to play with it. If it wasn't exactly a haunting or voices in his head, if that makes sense to you.
No, it does. I, it's always interesting with any of these stories because it always leaves everybody with questions. There's never ever definitive answers. Ever. You never hear somebody ever say, "Yeah, I was out of my mind and then I got better and this is what I heard and why." It's people that unfortunately were once well off mentally and then they just go off the deep end. The deep end, for people that aren't familiar with that term, just means they became something that they aren't and went 180 opposite of their personality and acted that way for a negative way. You know, you
Well,
go ahead.
so so to continue the Amityville though, now you got the people that moved in afterwards. The Lutz family, they moved into the house in December of 75. Now this is where the the husband and wife, they believe, they moved in. It was even though they later, after the terrifying incidents, allegedly forced them to flee, but they were basically saying that there was stuff oozing from the walls, eyes peering into the house, foul odors. Basically, I believe the wife was allegedly levitating in bed. It was rather a disquieting month. And the guy, he claimed he woke up at 3:15 a.m. each night, the exact time of the death of the family members. And he couldn't explain why. He said at 3:15 he just woke up. He had to wake up. So you got people after the fact claiming that the house was haunted. Now it leans more back towards the child of the I'm just going to say it was like child abuse, probably if the abusive dad, the passive mom, and then the alcohol. But it was really it's kind of a weird thing if you research the Amityville, and it kind of makes you wonder what really happened there. But you also had another one, and I'm going to throw this one's kind of famous, called The Haunting in Connecticut. You ever heard of that one?
Yes.
Okay. One of the guys that I used to deal with in the paranormal world, I dealt with him, done some investigations with him a couple times. He was actually the lead investigator on that. They made a movie about it. He said the movie was nowhere near what happened. He said they had a lot of things backwards, and he was kind of upset because, he thought they were going to tell, give at least 75% of the truth of what happened there. But in 86, the Snedeker family, they moved into a house located in Southington, Connecticut. And they were seeking a rental home close to the UConn Hospital, University of Connecticut Hospital, I guess. Their son was undergoing treatment of Hodgkin's lymphoma. And I remember some of the story. The mother was traveling. They lived like 2.5 hours away. And she was traveling that far to carry him because that's the only place that he could get treatments for that. And so she found this house. It was a decent deal. I think they bought it actually, but she didn't like the question I had was it had a basement. Why didn't you go down in the basement? So she bought the house, and after they bought it and they kind of moved in, shortly after moving in, they found out that it was previously a funeral home. And down in the basement where the son slept. Now, this is where I'm like, no, that kid would be sleeping in the living room. But he made his bedroom for some reason. He walked down in the basement and he made his bedroom in the basement. Now, in the basement, they still had the embalming table, the metal table sitting down there where they would embalm them and do all that stuff before they show them during the funeral. And this kid decided to make his bedroom part of that deal. Now, as time went on, he was basically getting disturbed by noises and apparitions were appearing. Now, you're in a funeral home, so you constantly have the deceased coming through there all the time. So the amount of spirits that are probably standing around in there is probably ridiculous. But this kid, he saw apparitions, he heard strange noises, and experienced physical attacks. The oldest son was particularly affected, and he was claiming to see a young man with long hair who would communicate with him, sometimes in a threatening way. Other families reported feeling, touched and threatened by unseen forces. Now, they described, again, disembodied voices being slap touched, and the smelling of the decaying flesh would also fill the air. The the thing was, I believe this kid, he was claiming that he heard voices. Now, this, you can do the research on it. I'm not going to go in depth on the rest of the story, but that I can believe that. I can believe that he was hearing voices and something made him do what he did. I don't remember. I forgot if he actually killed him or if he tried to kill him or something.
Well, for him to be where he's at that location with the kind of the epicenter of death, unfortunately, you know, for somebody to go off and do something strange, I logically would err on the more side of caution, but say, hey, this person is around, you know, a place where people pass away, have passed away, you know, that's a lot of energy. So the chances of something happen in my mind would be pretty good as far as possession, being taken over, going into a trance, getting information passed to you, whatever it may be, versus it just being randomly in some house somewhere. I mean, don't get me wrong, that still happens too. I I think a lot of this in itself is a subject that is what has been propelled by the entertainment industry, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s for movies. I mean, that's what movies are. They get you to be able to pay attention the first 20 minutes, and then after the first 20 minutes, and it's the next 30 minutes, and next thing you know, the movie's over. But my point is that a lot of these type of stories are always in movies. And sometimes you may see a reality show on TV about this happened, or, you know, these events and characters' names have been changed, but these are true occurrences, and they try to retell the story. I honestly think if all of the stories that people know that happen to them personally or their families, unfortunately, or even, for them individually, unfortunately, if this was just like, if there was a running tally, a list, if it was published somewhere to let people know all these different things, I think it would shake society to its core because it wouldn't be a one off. It wouldn't be an urban legend. It wouldn't be something that's just, oh, yeah, I heard about this event happening. Or that's the old house on the corner that we don't go by as kids. We always grew up steering clear because we heard strange things happen there. What I'm getting at is there's probably a lot of things in everybody's town where everybody lives that have happened that have kept under wraps all over the world. I don't think it's going to be predicated on where you live, if it's a particular state, a particular region, a particular country, a particular part of the world. I think it's going to be everywhere. So,
Well, the other thing I kind of looked through my notes and I noticed he didn't really he had thoughts of killing him, I guess. But what he started doing was, which is weird, they noticed his personality. And this is the oldest son. He was more affected because of the spirit, the long haired kid spirit. But they noticed his personality began to change. He became irritable and reckless, often inflicting cruel punishments on his younger siblings. He said on one occasion he placed one of the brothers on a gurney and spun him around until the younger boy begged him to stop. And then he also locked his brother in a chest and walked away, left him there. But the worst incident, he attacked his cousin Tammy and was consequently forced to spend 45 days in a hospital. Doctors eventually diagnosed him with schizophrenia. Now, here you're talking about a kid that moved 2.5 hours away with his family so that the one brother, I guess, can be treated for, the lymphoma. And the oldest son is perfectly sane, moves in there, perfect. Nothing wrong with him, right? So he acts weird. He attacks his siblings. Next thing you know, he's 28 days in the hospital. And what do? Well, they diagnosed him with schizophrenia. And that was after, of course, he told them about the entities he saw regularly. But they noted that the medication he was on to treat, he was the one that had cancer. I'm sorry. So the medication he was on to treat his cancer could not given him hallucinations or triggered any dormant schizophrenic illness. Now, let me say it again. They noted that the medication he was on could not have given him hallucinations or triggered any dormant schizophrenic illness. So that means if I'm reading that right, that means that what that kid was saying was true. Because if He was on medication for his cancer, but that medication could not have made him see things or hear things, right? What what other so we're just gonna diagnose him with schizophrenia.
Right.
That's the perfect
Right. The perfect right. Insanity. And that goes back to what I originally said about the court systems and medicine and pleading, rather somebody being of sound mind or not, and that's it. Because if the court of law introduced a defense of possession, that in itself is verifiably stating legally that possession happens. And if it happens, then that opens up a whole new arena of things.
well, that
And
allows anybody and their grandmother to come in and go, "Oh, I was possessed," even though
right,
you weren't. They're gonna use it because,
right,
oh, guess what? You're going to a funny farm instead of a prison.
right.
You know,
A funny farm is a mental asylum for people that don't know that phrase. So, is there anything else that you wanted to add to that there, Dalton?
well, I just want to say, like, so basically, what we're looking at is we're looking at one that some abuse and alcohol and drugs might happen, and then definitely the haunting in Connecticut, I would say, was definitely a spirit deal. And you can go online. You got David Berkowitz. You can talk about. He was the one that killed the women in the Bronx. Was told he was hearing things. You got several of them. Herbert Mullen killed a bunch of people in California, claiming that if he made sacrifices to the nature, that basically an earthquake wouldn't happen. One last one I want to talk about too that you can research is the trial of Cheyenne Johnson, also known as the Devil Made Me Do It case.
Yep.
That case, have you ever heard of that?
Yeah, I've heard of it
You ever
before.
heard of that?
Yes, I have.
Oh, okay. Okay, because what that case turned into was actually they made the movie The Conjuring behind that one. So
It's
it's pretty
interesting. Well,
pretty interesting. So
you see, but that right there is exactly what I'm talking about. A lot of these things you're going to hear in entertainment or TV shows or movies, but you're not going to hear in real life. And like you said, that real life scenario was adapted. I can't say the phrase. Maybe you can say adapted.
no, I ain't even trying.
I'm just not there today. But the whole point is
Well,
that it was made to be a movie from a real life scenario.
Well, it wasn't a scenario. It was an actual case that the person was claiming that they were possessed by a demonic possession.
Right.
And even the attorney was like, went in there and said, basically, my client was possessed by a demon or whatever. And the judge ruled that such a defense could never be proven and was therefore infeasible in a court of law. And of course, the person was convicted. So it was an actual event. And just like David Berkowitz or the guy in California, those are actual events. Those are actual cases that were people talking about that they were hearing things, and things were forces were forcing them to do things. Now, the one thing I do got to say is that they heard the voices, they did whatever, and you got people that can control it. And then what makes me not understand, and I want to know your thought process on that, is you can hear the voices, but they're not physically like taking the body over to make them do it. You see where I'm going with this? So
I think
what made them do it?
I think an introduction of a foreign influence on anybody would make them question reality, make them question religion and their faith if they followed faith. I think it would make them question life in general, because definitively, for that person at least, it would show that there is something else there in life besides oneself and what they interact with daily. So who knows? Maybe this individual did whatever they did because the deal was, you do what I say, and then I will leave you alone. Otherwise, I'm going to torment you for the rest of your life and be a voice in your head. Who knows?
Well,
Um,
let's say the case. Let's go with the case of the devil made me do it thing. This guy, he had visions of an old man, including the man was appearing as a demonic beast who muttered Latin and threatened to steal his soul. So that's why I mentioned, because you just mentioned, them saying, "Hey, you do what I tell you, and I won't torment you." Or where,
yep.
here you got one where this demonic beast threatened to steal his soul, and although the family allegedly heard strange noises coming from the attic, no one but this guy ever witnessed the old man, and he was the only one that could see him. And he experienced night terrors. Now, there is a night terror type haunt, right? We know about this. So I was wondering if this guy was experiencing actual night terror, which
Maybe.
is biblical. But I say, like, I would give it the rarity of it being an actual paranormal event. I would give it a low rarity. Like, I do believe that people do hear voices, but what makes you go and do it? Like, okay, so in 24, you got the dude that shot up 10 people in a library or something up in, I forget where it was, but he said he heard voices. My question would be like, okay, you're hearing voices, but what part of them voices are making you? What's making you actually do it? What forced you to go do that heinous crime? You know what I'm saying? So you can have, like, the haunting in Connecticut. Okay, that dude was being actually talked to. He was living in the bottom of a funeral home with an embalming table at the foot of his bed, basically. So yes, he is subject to dark energy. Plus, he's suffering from cancer. He's basically dying. He's got lymphoma cancer, and he's getting treatments. But none of that stuff that he's been taking could cause hallucinations. So I believe he was seeing what he was seeing, and I believe that something was forcing him, was actually channeling through him, or not really, maybe a lightweight possession that we call it, but was actually taking him over a little bit. Now, Amityville, that's a big question for me. Always has. Alcohol, drugs, and child abuse. You have anger towards your family already. Why you would kill the other kids, your brothers and sisters, I don't know. Did your schizophrenia or your psycho stuff actually go that far to do that? Who knows? But that's my whole thing, is most of these cases, what they say is, I heard voices.
Yeah.
Okay, you heard voices, but what made you do it? Why did you do it? You know, but there is a few cases that I read where I could see that, there was a channeling going on with a spirit, or some actual lightweight possession going on. But other ones, I don't know, man. That's a tough subject.
Yeah. No,
I
it
mean, even
is.
when you told me what we were about to talk about, I was just like, yeah, this is going to be a tough one to spit out.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, I think the paranormal, there's what we understand with society and what's in books, which is logic or history. Then you have the science aspect, if you want to throw that in there. You have the metaphysical aspect for the other side. And then you got the layman's terms of just, here's what we think it is, bluntly and easily said. Mix it all together, and sometimes you might have a well-rounded answer, but more times than not, there isn't an answer. So it allows myself, and I would imagine everybody else that listens to these subjects or thinks about them, if they do, to explore and have free thought, free thinking, and come up with their own conclusions. Everybody's is a different individual that has different experiences in life. So something that may be far removed from me and you ever understanding might be clear as day to somebody else. As me and you definitely know, the paranormal is not an exact science or even science at all. It's just a subject and a for some people a way of life, for some people a hobby to explore and to see what happens and to adventure in. I'll even dare say. But for other
Well, look at
individuals,
the
it's a very scary thing. So,
look at our topic on possession when we talked about possession, right? We talked about our experiences with somebody that was being possessed or being channeled or taken over in a form. I didn't catch any wind of these people wanting to go and commit heinous crimes.
no.
So that's why I say, man, I would drop that kind of stuff down in a very low percentile, a very low percentile. The rest of it, I'm going to say, is mainly just that those people weren't really right to begin with. And I'm not, and by no means, I don't want anybody to think that we're pinpointing people and we're doing whatever. We're just stating our opinion on the circumstances, the actual events that have taken place. We're not like pinpointing one person and going, oh, that person was this, this, and no. Don't take us wrong like that. We're just two normal people trying to put this out there as best we can, and all we're doing is giving our opinions on what the possibility could be. And that's all they are, is opinions. There's no facts here. Now, the fact that Amityville was a legit case, haunting in Connecticut's a legit case. The Cheyenne Johnson, The Devil Made Me Do It, that's a legit case. The Barkowitz, there's 19 famous, hey, The Devil Made Me Do It cases. Those are all legit. But like Pax said, there's no real definitive answer. So basically, what we did was we just kind of went over some stories that we've read and researched, and just we're trying to put our own opinion on it. On that, I'm going to say a big majority of it is just the purple person's mentality. A very small percentage is going to be paranormal. If you agree with that or not.
Oh, I do. They're my words. I got to agree. And if I didn't agree and had an inner conflict, that's a whole different conversation. So,
I'm not even willing to debate this one. I mean, if you disagree, fine, okay, that's your deal. I don't really care. I'm not trying to. I'm not trying. This is a very. There's a lot of stories.
That's what the
though.
voices are
I mean,
telling me
if
to
you
tell you
go-
right now, Dalton. They're telling me to disagree. Just saying.
disagree. Well, you don't know. You want to know what my voices are telling me. But anyway, the thing is there's a lot of stories out here. There's a lot of people. I mean, I've come across. Let me ask you this: have you ever done an investigation and come across one of the spouses or even a kid saying that their parent wasn't right, that something was wrong with them, they weren't acting right,
Yes. Yes, definitely.
they were coming out? Yeah.
And
So
that's where
go ahead.
when that happens, being the outsider looking in, that's where you can't have any preconceived notions of things you may have already previously known. You got to take everything objectively and equally with a fair hand and judge it as things come along, and then eventually form an opinion or see what doesn't seem right and what stands out. Because a lot of times, meeting clientele, family members, people, individuals, they'll paint a picture of somebody, of who it's concerning or who can't be there at the moment, but we'll meet them later or whatever the case is. And then meeting the person, you already have a running idea of how this person's personality is, their mindset, their motivational factors, things they do in life, their hobbies, their job, what their purpose is, if they're a patriarch, a matriarch, whatever it is, you have this already built. So then you go meet the person, and then you see it for yourself and you digest it all. And then you say, okay, well, everybody's saying this, and this is what I'm being presented with. So then you have two versions sometimes, and you have to figure out what really is different and what is normal. And sometimes it will take more than one individual to say, hey, to paint a picture. And I remember one specific case that I investigated, and I had to do that. I had to talk to a few individuals. And the more people that got brought into this scenario for me to learn about this individual, the more I started getting smaller, intimate details of knowledge that each individual had known, but the other individuals wouldn't. And so then that helped me solidify, okay, here's a baseline of this person. And then I was able to see the interaction with this individual and how they acted. This was actually for possession. And at that point in time, then I was able to clearly and identifiably say, okay, from what everything I've seen in itself, what I'm seeing right in front of me right now of behavior or mannerism or interest or accent or speech or the way someone's physical attributes are for physicalities, the way they hold themselves, the way they move. I could automatically know what was different compared to what I was told before. So then I could say, okay, this is how this is affecting this person potentially. So there's your long answer for a short question.
Well, and it doesn't necessarily have to be an entity. It could just be dark energy, which really, you know, dark energy, like I've said before, ain't always what it entails to be. But when you get a person that runs across the dark energy, it could just be the energy that changes their mood because of their sensitivity to the energy that they're sensing. They could have picked that up in a mall. They could have picked it up at a gas station and brought it home. And eventually it's that energy started to change them and make them act differently. Now, I've never heard of this coming down to a heinous act of murder or any kind of, hey, I'm going to kill my family type deal. I've never run across that. Now, I will tell you, I had one that was interesting years and years ago. I think it was right before I met you that the mother came to me and she realized what I did and stuff. And back then, I didn't really do a whole lot of investigating as much, unless it was really, like somebody was actually being physically harmed. So she came to me and she was telling me about, how their family, you start out with that picture book, white picket fence, swing on the porch type family. You know what I'm saying? And then it was like after they moved, I think it was right after they moved. It was right before they moved, actually. She said her husband was acting kind of weird. She couldn't understand it. Thought he was tired, thought, it was just exhausting. And he was very starting to be where the guy used to get up and be motivated to take the trash out and get the mail and, prep dinner for his wife to cook or he's going to cook. You know what I'm saying? He was very active. And all of a sudden he started getting a little sluggish. Well, they moved from one house to the next and they had two kids. And when they moved to the new house, that's when stuff had really picked up. Now, my question to them was in the beginning was, have you ever been to this house you moved to? And I know what the answer is because everybody goes and looks at the place before they move in, right? So that's what they did. They took a tour of the house. They liked it, especially him. Here he is being normal, active. Yes, honey, I love this house. Makes me feel like I'm at home, blah, blah, blah. And then they go back to their original house. Well, she was telling me that he started acting weird. When they got to the new house, then the stuff really started getting down where he started abusing one of the children, like not in any kind of weird way, but just like punishing them for no reason, slapping them with the belt, backhanding them, physical stuff. You know what I'm saying? Very unlikely for this guy, is what she said. Very unlikely. So I researched and I went to the family, and they said the same thing. This guy was never like this at all.
So
So
being very abrasive and out of character.
right, very very out of character and not himself. Just wants to sit around the house, demand the wife bring me a drink, do this, do that. You know what I'm saying? So we went to the new house, and of course, the father was working. It was just the mother and the kids. And I asked the kids, I said, "Hey," and you can see, short of us having to call law enforcement, basically, you can see the kid was, still marked up. So the other kid was a little younger, probably 9 or 10 years old, but an artist, believe it or not, a great drawer. This kid could draw, could look at something and draw it to the T pretty much, right? So the mother, we were out there and we were talking, and I had somebody with me. She was actually a medium psychic because I wanted to feel the energy of this house. Because what I'm feeling, sensing, is that something followed him from the house when they did the tour, attached to him, went to the old house and started to change him, but then got back to the new house where this entity was strongest and then really grabbed hold of him. Like lured him in at the new house and then put the hooks in it at the old house, I mean, and then put the hooks in it at the new house. So my psychic medium, she was talking to him, and I kept noticing this other younger child sitting over here, like I said, about 10 years old. And he finally, you know, the kid finally looked at me and he kind of just waved at me like, come here, And I thought, well, this is weird. And I don't really want to go off alone with a, young child without the parent being around. And it's nothing but, safety reasons and disrespect for the family. They don't know me. I don't really know them. So, but he or she grabbed me by the hand and walked me into the room. And on the wall, he had drawings of this older man. No, nobody in the family. I said, well, is this your grandfather? And the kid was like, no. And I said, well, who is this? And he said, well, when my dad is in certain parts of the house, this is the man I see standing next to him. And I'm like, dude, what? Like, hold on now. What did you just say? Can you? And he's like, he or she is like, yeah, my dad could be in certain points of the house, like the garage, and he named the points of the house, the kitchen, the garage, the living room mainly, by the couch where they got their couch. And he said his dad had to have the couch against that wall. Like his mom tried to do whatever. But the dad had to have his couch near this wall, on this wall. And so the child was like, this is the man I see standing next to my dad in these points of the house. So then I had to go back out. Me and the psychic medium, we walked out into the front yard and I was like, are you picking up like anything? And she said, yes, I'm picking up an angry old man. And I said, if you went in there and saw what this kid's an amazing artist. And you just look at these pictures he drew of his dad standing there. And he only did like the headshot and the shoulders. And then right next to him was his headshot and shoulders of this old man. So long story short, I just had to go through that to get you to the meat and potatoes of what we found. But long story short, there was an old man back in 1918 or 1915 that passed away. Stories that we have researched in the library of neighbors, people that knew him, said he was a very angry man, didn't like children, didn't have a wife because I guess he was demanding to his wife and they left. She left, or I guess he was married a couple of times, they said, but anyway, you catch the gist. So this guy of normal circumstance went and did a tour at a house to go rent it or buy it, whatever they were doing. And the entity attached to him came to the old house to prep him, basically, I would call it. And then when they moved to the new house, sunk the hooks in and just made him this terrible dude. But it started at the old house. The demeanor, all the attitude changing, and some of the smacking and the belt whipping and stuff wasn't severe as it got when they got to the new house. But it was all about this old man that used to live on that property. They said that old house was torn down and a new house was built, which me and that doesn't matter, right? It has no bearing.
Nope.
But yeah, I mean, there's I have not told that story in a long time, but it is something that came to mind, and I was kind of hesitant to tell it because it is kind of a private investigation, even though the mother, they eventually moved out of the house and went somewhere else. And I came back like, I don't know, 5 or 6 months later, and the father was fine. And man, he was, them kids, if they could have a Ferrari in the driveway, that guy would buy him one. He was doing whatever he could to make up to the one kid that he totally was just like on. He was on that kid. And the other one, I think the other one he didn't touch because the old man knew that the kid could see him. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because obviously he's drawing pictures of him, right?
Yep.
But just a clear case of somebody taking somebody over and they got abusive. But again, not in the sense of, hey, I'm going to get up at 3 a.m. and shoot my family kind of thing. I've never run across that other than the stories that are been told. But I thought maybe you might want to indulge in that story because it was kind of interesting.
Yeah, it was. I mean, there's a lot to it, a lot of perspective and insight, and definitely another way to glean information and just think about something from the paranormal to be like, here's something else that's out there. Unfortunately, more times than not, the paranormal is normally not good from a investigator standpoint, unless it's something that's recreational, then that's different. Sometimes it's fun. So, with that being said, that's going to be the end of our podcast on possessions and crime, which is something I never really thought I'd say in the same sentence. But this is season 3, episode 1 of Theory of Paranormal. As always, we welcome everybody that stayed with us and listened to us throughout all of our different seasons, or any new listeners. We currently now have a website that is up and going, and it will be built upon over the next few weeks to come, with more content being added. At the moment, there is a portal you can go into and send us direct messages or send us any information that you would like for us to know. Or if you have any questions, you can just go ahead and plug in your information and go from there. And you can reach us at theoryparanormal.com. So
Cool, man. I'd like to thank Lena for bringing out. I hope we kind of went over some situations and kind of answered the question that yes, some of it can be paranormal, but I think a bigger part of it's going to be the mental state of the actual person. But yes, thanks for the question. Also, the Facebook page is always there, Theory Paranormal Facebook. I see a lot of people. We've picked up a few more views every day. Feel free to check it out. We have evidence on there. And while you're there, if you feel like it, give us a like. If not, cool. Enjoy the evidence that's up there. Hopefully we can get to some more investigating here by the end of the year and post some new evidence. But another great topic, a one that I was not too sure about because it is kind of a thing it's kind of hard to spit that kind of stuff out. But anyway, I hope we did well for Lena.
yeah. So appreciate everybody listening. And as always, as we say at Theory Paranormal, don't be afraid to ask questions.